Good evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I am Ladi Akiriduluale. Here are the highlights at this hour. Federal government pulls out of 2020 WAEC exams, strongly warns state governments against reopening of schools. Domestic aviation operations restart in Lagos and Abuja. Protocols and guidelines strictly followed, but passenger numbers are low. And South Africa provides almost $1 million for COVID-19 herbal research as United States sets another record for single-day cases of infection. The federal government says Unity schools will not participate in the forthcoming school living certificate examinations organized by the West African Examinations Council, WAEC, and that all federal government schools will not resume until they are considered safe. The Minister of Education, Adamu, disclosed this at the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting. He is also asking WAEC and state governments to reconsider their decision to open schools for exams.
Schools under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Education will not reopen on August 4th or any time soon. Our schools will only open when we believe it is safe for our children, and that is when the situation is right, not when incidence of the infection is going up in the nation. Yesterday, we called a meeting of stakeholders who will tell us their situation and what needs to be done in order for it to be safe. While the meeting was going on, WAEC announced that they are starting on the... So let's see who they are going to start with. And I would also like to, at this position, ask those states that have already announced, I appeal to them. I think it is not safe. I feel responsible for all children, not just the children who are in federal government-controlled schools. Please, let's save our children from this. You can just take one scenario. One infected child going into a class. Because, this social distancing is just some beautiful theory. When the cameras are there, everybody will be obeying it. When there is no camera, everybody will just be normal, especially children. One child is enough to infect everyone in the class. When they close class, they go to the dormitory. Everybody in the dormitory by tomorrow will probably be. So this is not the right time to open schools. I appeal to the states that have already announced to reconsider it. If we are given the choice, me as Minister of Education, if I'm given the choice, I don't mind Nigeria losing a complete school year than exposing our children to danger. I think their health is more important than the examination they are going to write. And WAEC is a parasite of the Ministry of Education. They cannot determine for the government what it does. I think they should probably change their dates or will do without them.
Minister of Education, Adamu. The current realities in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted lapses in the health sector in Borno State, as its governor, Babagana Zulum, says the state is set to hire nurses and doctors to address the shortfall of health personnel and reduce the ratio of doctors to patients, especially in rural areas. Governor Zulum reveals this at the ESCO chamber of the Government House in Maiduguri while inaugurating a technical committee that will work towards the establishment of a medical college as well as a teaching hospital at the Borno State University. He says directives have been given for the recruitment of 150 nurses, 19 doctors, and 133 retired nurses and midwives who are still hale and hearty and can function effectively. Since April 2020, when the index case was recorded in that state, some 555 people have contracted the virus, 470 have recovered, while 33 deaths have also been recorded, leaving the number of active cases at 85.
We have also directed for the recruitment of 133 retired nurses and midwives. Commissioner of Health, you also have to take note that all those retired doctors those that have retired in Borno State government, or even in the federal government, the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hostel, those who are hale and hearty, that can function effectively, should also be recruited. It's in fulfillment of our promises to the enemy that government will review your submissions with a view to implementing them. So far, so good. We have started with two most important recommendations that you have made to us.
Meanwhile, health workers in Ebonyi State are to undergo compulsory testing for COVID-19. This directive was given by Deputy Governor Mr. Kelechi Igwe while addressing local government chairmen at the government house in Abakaliki. According to him, this is to ensure that the health workers are hale and hearty while carrying out their duties in ensuring health care service. Ebonyi State now has 508 confirmed cases of COVID-19, of which 82 health workers have contracted the virus. Let's go to our Abuja studios now, where... Okay, I understand it's a Skype, where we've been joined by someone who will discuss this latest bombshell in the education sector with us. Thank you for joining us at this time, and thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening.
Mr. Anibasi Eyo, thank you, as I said, for your time. Let me begin by saying, is this a decision that you think, given everything that has preceded this, both locally and internationally, is the right one?
So, first of all, I'm speaking from the point of view of a key stakeholder. I don't represent the federal government nor the state governments. We need to look at where we are as a country. One of the recent PTF updates has shown in the recent days and weeks that we are beginning to have another spike of the virus. And because of that, it shows the curve is not being flattened. In fact, from all indication, it's clear that we haven't surmounted the issue at hand. And if we've not surmounted the issue at hand, I believe we need to be quite careful how we reopen sectors. And education as a sector is very pivotal because it's a sector that you expose a lot of people, children in particular, and it creates a lot of vulnerable issues, particularly where you've got boarding centers, etc. We also know that what we're looking at now at this prime period was those at the exit points, those taking exams. So if it's just for the purpose of examination, that's assessment and not learning, personally, I don't think there is an issue in delaying assessments. What the institutions such as WAEC and examination bodies could do is to accelerate the lead time in the assessment, so that something that normally would take 4 months, can we get those results out in a month's time to make it easier to transition those children at that time. So the issue here is that children going back to take exams are not learning. You are only assessing them for the learning they've done. And therefore, is it really worth the risk if the country is still in a very precarious situation? So from my own informed situation, I think we're not quite there. I mean, Lagos is an epicenter, and it's one of the places that the issue has been well managed. I can't say that for the rest of the states of the country. So putting the children back across the country may actually incur a greater risk than what we think at this point in time.
This is a very delicate subject because, on the other hand, if one were to listen to the education minister speaking earlier in the day, he did say that, I mean, given a choice, if it were a choice, he would rather that the children, all children in various levels of education, lose a year of schooling if that would make them safe for the next year when they would be available or when things would be much better, probably under much better control, for them to resume and then go to school without all this hanging over their heads. Is that really a viable option? Is it something that one should consider? Again, a question of life versus livelihood, if you like.
Correct. I think we need to look at our Nigeria situation and scenario. We cannot follow what anybody else is doing. And when we look at that holistically, we realize we have three critical issues. The issue of economic livelihood, which is the economy, the issue of health, which is, the health situation, and lastly, learning. Learning was already a crisis before COVID, and obviously COVID has exacerbated that crisis. So in finding what works best, we need to understand the interplay of these critical three areas. If we lose 1 year in education, when I mean 1 year in what we call formal education, does that necessarily mean that we are behind? However, if we lose 1 year worth of economy, does that mean it will take us a longer time to grow the economy compared to if we lose 1 year of people dying in healthcare? So I think the minister might have been misunderstood, but I think from my point here is that we need to be very responsible in making those decisions. It's not a matter of saying we opened everywhere, and then at the end of the day we have a bigger problem, which is a healthcare problem. We don't have enough hospitals, we don't have enough healthcare professionals. So the healthcare system infrastructure is already operating at a very negative territory. So further exacerbating that system would take us into a critical place where we cannot afford to be. However, we can employ other methodologies for learning. And I think this is really where government, public and private sector need to work together. Okay. There's online, there's e-learning, there's video methodologies, there's interactive video instruction. There's a plethora of methodologies that we can use to avail the time that has been lost in school. For instance, if Nigeria was at war, would we be talking about children going back to classrooms? Not exactly. So we need to know where we are as a country. The budgets are open. We don't have the money that we could have thrown at a lot of this problem. So we need to be very pragmatic. And I think this is where a lot of this has to be community-led. And I think that's one area where we need to work harder, communicating at the grassroots level, so that we can deploy education into community and grassroots organizations and setups that can enable us to recover some of the lost time. I want to explain something. There's a dichotomy between public and private education. Privately educated children haven't lost any time. Particularly with the structured private schools, they haven't lost any time. It's those in the public sector, which is a larger proportion of our population, that have suffered. So we need to look at this critically. It's not just about taking people back to school. And I want to retrace the point I said earlier. Taking kids back to do an exam is assessment. Assessment is one of the pivotal parts of education. Assessment is checking what you have learned. Now, if they were not learning anything for the last 4 or 5 months, what exactly are we assessing them on? Is that the most important thing? I don't think so. The most important thing is creating conducive learning, whether it's remote, whether it's online, and using methodologies and making sure our children are learning in safe environments. We shouldn't just rush children back to school for the sake of assessments.
Mr. Ani Basi Ayo, thank you so much for your perspective on this subject. Of course, in the days and weeks ahead, this is likely to continue to be a hot topic of discussion and debate. Mr. Basi Ayo is the Chief Executive Officer, Axiom Learning Solutions in Lagos. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a great time.
Flight operations between Abuja and Lagos have resumed after over 3 months of shutdown of the nation's airspace owing to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondents in both cities monitored the resumption, where passenger numbers are said to be low.
The ticketing hall at the Muritala Mohammed Airport 1 welcomes passengers wearing face masks, and the floor markings provide the needed distancing as part of the boarding protocols in the COVID-19 era as flights resume. Going through screening requires dropping personal items in this transparent bag. While the passenger figures are not very high, we were also curious to know why some passengers are flying at this time.
I have stayed in-house for the past 3 months. My business is suffering. In fact, I'm even becoming sick. So, and now when they open the airport for us to travel, I want to be the early caller because I have some business in Abuja.
I don't see anything wrong in traveling this time since all safety measures have been put in place at the airport.
After a moment of waiting, it's time to board the aircraft, and COVID-19 protocols are also enforced.
The aircraft we used this morning is a Boeing 737-800, a capacity of 148. And I can tell you that what we have on board this morning was above average.
Soon the aircraft taxis for takeoff. At the Abuja airport, passengers are greeted by the new normal, which includes washing of hands, decontamination of luggage, and even the use of sniffer dogs for further checks on baggage. But what about adherence to the safety protocols?
So far, so good. From what we've seen, there have been significant level of compliance with the airlines. We've had feedbacks, reports, and pictures from both Lagos and Abuja airports, which are the two airports that have opened today. And it's been quite impressive. So far, so good.
Arriving passengers also share their onboard experience.
You really don't have a situation where passengers now have to, clog themselves up.
No, there's a lot of distancing. At least I think we're not much in the plane. Not we actually full. One per seat.
The aviation industry is one of the sectors worst hit by the outbreak of COVID-19, but the gradual reopening of the sector for business may well help to set it on the road to recovery as the battle against COVID-19 rages on. Bukola Joe Oketumbi, Channels Television News.
We'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll expand the discussion on the restart of domestic aviation. Mr. Tayo Ojuri will join us after the break. Welcome back to our COVID-19 update. As we did promise before the break, I'm being joined now via Skype from Abuja by an aviation consultant, Mr. Tayo Ojuri. Mr. Ojuri, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you.
You flew with one of the planes that departed Lagos today to Abuja. What was the experience like?
The experience was seamless, but the challenge there was from the onstart, where the flight that was supposed to leave at 6:30 was rescheduled for 10:30 a.m. I believe that was due to the 3 hours time lag which was given, and I kind of figured out logically, if you had 3 hours, 3:30 would not be an ideal time to be at the airport, considering the curfew time that starts or stops at 4. So I didn't think 10:30 was ideal to be moved to, and that actually did not give a taste for first day start. But otherwise, operationally, protocol adherence and safety were all adhered to, and it gave a good measure of comfort for the traveling public to fly again. I was with so much enthusiasm to be in the air again.
Now, one of the other things that our reporters did speak to is that the passenger numbers today, being the first day, were quite low. The real test of all these protocols and everything that's been put in place will come when passenger numbers rise, right?
There are two schools of thoughts about that. There's a school of thought that says yes, the airports were supposed to be open on the 21st of June, and now with the opening on July 8th, there wasn't ample time for the airlines to market their tickets. That's why the passengers number have not peaked. But I see that there will be a spike in the next week or two. The spike will be driven by two factors, in my opinion. One factor will be from the passengers that had been stuck at home or been stuck in different locations prior to the lockdown, and they'll be able to meet with family and friends and to meet up. That's one of the drivers of the demographic of passengers we'll see in the next 1 or 2 weeks. and then that we'll see another set of passengers that would be driven by business. With the business, we see lots of people that want to continue or finish the transactions that were existing prior to COVID-19. But thereafter, unfortunately, the statistics or the surveys we've done does not show that this increase will continue, because we don't still know when the international airports will be open. To the best of our knowledge and from trends and information statistics we have, we see that about 30% of international traffic are feeders to international domestic traffic. So that's going to affect domestic travel. And then a great impact, significant driver is Nigeria's economy as well. Aviation is a catalyst for the economy. And when the economy is buoyant, aviation is a good lagging factor. So with the economy the way it is, it's going to affect the passenger numbers.
The other thing, of course, is you did speak to one of the people we spoke to in the report preceding our conversation did allude to it that, there was quite a lot of space in the aircraft and it was virtually one passenger per group of seats and all of that. That won't remain the same, but it won't address the ultimate question of the issue of social distancing and how safe it is to have people sit next to each other in aircraft. You know, that debate has been going on as to how viable it will be for the airlines if they have to give up the middle seats for social distancing. What do you make of that? What do you think has happened in that case? The minister was quite cagey about it. He didn't come out one way or the other. He kept on saying that the aircraft was safe anyway, but he didn't take a position on the issue of middle.
With the airline, from my experience, and that's actually why we actually tried to simulate this experience, feel and touch with the travel today with all the major airlines. Our team went with those flights to have a feel and touch of the experience and what the passenger feedback was. On the aircraft I flew with, there was the passengers that were actually complaining because the middle seat was actually occupied. And with that occupation of the middle seat, they did complain that there were social distancing on ground and in the lounge, in the waiting lounges. And then when it came time to be on board, they had to sit together. What needs to be done, and what is being done actually was well done by the cabin crew by educating and informing the passengers that the aircraft is safe to fly because it's sanitized. The HEPA air purifier eliminates 99.9% of the germs, and as well as the aircraft goes higher, it recycles the air, and over and beyond that, the sitting arrangement of the passenger sitting actually mitigates the risk of the spread of coronavirus on top of the aircraft. All that said, we should actually, with the protocols put in place, eliminating or leaving the middle seats will not be viable economically for domestic airlines. Prior to COVID-19, there had been lots of existing financial challenges which had plagued the domestic airlines. So with this now, it's going to affect, if they decide to leave the middle seats open, it's going to affect the revenue and it's going to affect the sustainability of the airlines. So it's a no-no, in my opinion.
Mr. Ojuri, thank you so much for your perspective on today's reopening. And one can only wish you and the other stakeholders in the aviation sector good luck as you open and continue to expand this over time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure. Stay safe.
As the total number of COVID-19 cases in Nigeria move towards the 30,000 mark, the number of people that have recovered from the infection is also rising. In the last 24 hours, 280 patients were discharged in 21 states, including the Federal Capital Territory, bringing the number of those discharged to 12,108. The confirmed fatalities now stand at 669. That's 2.2%. Case fatality ratio, leaving the total active cases at 17,012. So far, 169,629 samples have been tested in the 36 states of the Federation, plus the FCT. The top 5 states with the highest number of cases in Nigeria are Lagos with 11,520, the FCT with 2,322, Oyo has 1,530, Edo 1,489, and Delta has 1,285. Of the total confirmed cases, 19,612 are males, while the females account for 10,177. Although everyone is susceptible to contracting the disease, the most affected age group remains those between the ages of 31 and 40. Community transmission is still actively going on in the country, and this can be seen in the number of cases with unknown exposure, which is 73% of the total cases, while those with travel history and contact cases hold 27%. The era of sending COVID-19 samples to Abuja from Nasarawa State for testing may soon be a thing of the past, as the Nigeria Center for Disease Control is set to establish a molecular laboratory and an emergency operations center at the state to enable it begin testing. The Director General of the NCDC, Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazu, said this when he visited Governor Abdullahi Sule at the Government House in Lafia. The laboratory will be set up at the Nasarawa State Dangerous Diseases Diagnostic Center.
We will work with you, support some low-hanging fruits in the short term. Definitely want to set up a molecular lab in the next few weeks, so this is not a prolonged process because the basics is there. And we will also commit to setting up an EOC in the new complex as soon as a room is identified, and actually not transfer the items in the existing room used as an EOC. So we leave the small equipment we provided the last time where they are, and it doesn't make sense moving them, and we'll set up a new room with the equipment it needs to run the response. But in addition, Your Excellency, I will also go back to our leadership in the Presidential Task Force, Secretary to the Federation, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, with whom we sit regularly, and brief him about the progress you have made in Nasarawa with your team, and express to him the opportunity to support you further and your team in the great work we're doing.
And we strongly believe that others who are interested in helping us will do that. So I want to thank you for agreeing to support us with the initial items. I'm also a believer of that. I want to start with the first step. Forget about how much it is that we need to develop that place. Let us go to one room in there and start something. If we start from that one room, somebody will come and support us for the second room and the third room. And then at the end of the day, we will have all the rooms filled up and ready to go.
A public health physician joins us now on the show via Skype audio from Victoria Island of Lagos State, Dr. Blossom Madua-Fokwa. Thank you so much for your time this evening and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, from what you've seen, everything that we have all together, aviation reopening, the schools being closed down after they are being reopened and all of that, what is your view about what's happening with the battle against COVID-19 at this point?
Okay, so with the aviation industry, reopening of the aviation industry, it's actually very complicated, and that there was a very, very well sort of thought out set of protocols that were put out before the reopening was announced. So the main idea is for us to remember that social distancing or physical distancing can be achieved even while we are opening some of these industries. So basically, for example, if you want to say travel from say Lagos to Abuja, one of the things that the federal government has actually stressed is to ensure that if you actually don't have to travel, you don't travel. So basically, people need to remember that you don't actually have to make that trip if you necessarily don't have to. And then one of the things that have actually put in place is making it like difficult for people that don't have to be inside the presence of the airport to be inside the airport. So typically, in those days when you had people like touts roaming around the airport, so those things will not be happening anymore. So that's for the aviation industry. So these are some of the protocols that have been put in place. I mean, getting your boarding pass before you get to the airport, so that reduce the time that you spend, say, at the airport counter, having marked positions where people actually are able to stand 2 feet from one another. So, but for the schools that you mentioned, you talked about the schools because they had initially said the graduating classes will be allowed to go back to school, and then there was a walk back from that position. I mean, basically, we all see the rising number of cases, and we know that, for example, like our Unity schools, we know we have a high teacher to student ratio is extremely high. So if you think about having to pack that number of students in a small classroom, and then you sort of start thinking, what if there's an outbreak? How are you going to manage that outbreak? So these are some of the thought processes that have gone into some of the decisions that the federal government has walked back from.
Now, the one of the schools, the one that involves schools in particular, has been quite contentious because everybody agree, even though everybody agrees that children in the list of those who are vulnerable are amongst the least vulnerable, but they are also amongst the least controllable. They are the least to get to observe social distancing, to keep their masks on, to stop touching each other and all of that. So if that is the case, but at the same time, you don't want them to lose academic time. And this is the other side of the argument. So I guess we're walking a fine line here. You talked about walking it back. The federal government seems to have maintained a fairly consistent line. It had left a lot of the decisions to states. But it seems that, not persuaded by what the states have put in place, the federal government has at least said, well, with us, we're not doing this. And we strongly advise that you don't do it.
Correct. So you're exactly right. That's exactly what has happened in the case of some of these schools. Because the truth of the matter is we're going to be sending our children back to schools. Some people go to school from, say, people that live in Lagos, you go back to school in the north. Let's say you have about 50 to 60 students in the class. We know that it's going to be extremely difficult for children to maintain social distancing, washing their hands regularly, wearing their masks. So we don't want, yes, you did point out that the case fatality rate for that age group is lower than, say, the older age group. However, you don't want to have an outbreak in that kind of situation because don't forget, you have teachers, that are much older than students, you have people that live with elderly individuals that could actually take COVID-19 back home and then transmit it to people that will actually die eventually. So these are some of the things that we have to think about when we're trying to say, open up the schools.
Just before I let you go, I must throw this in, and I deeply appreciate if you could give me the answer in 1 minute. Going forward, would you say, like the minister said, would you agree with the Minister of Education, that is, that it's better to lose an academic year than have the possibility of risking the loss of any of these students?
Okay, so I have children. I have 4 children. So I completely understand where the Minister of Education is going with that. If you have children, then you're going to be thinking to yourself, would it not be better for me to have children safe, then have them catch up eventually, than for me to throw my children out then with all the risk? And then we know that the health sector in Nigeria may not have capacity to handle the kind of outbreak that will result if we throw all these things together. So I completely see where he's coming from. As a mother myself, I will say I completely agree with him.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maduafogwa, for your time today, as usual, for your
Thank you for having
perspectives
me.
on the subjects. Thank you so much. Let's go outside our shores now, where the use of African medicines as immune modulators and anti-coronavirus therapeutics will soon be adopted by South Africa as the country continues to deal with surging numbers of COVID-19. The country's Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation says the country is in the process of implementing multiple interventions against the pandemic. This is added to a human vaccine trial which began late last month and has seen traditional healers protest against the project, which they claim is using citizens as guinea pigs.
On another matter of African natural medicines, which is a matter that has been of interest to many people, we want to say that we are in the process of implementing multiple interventions, including the use of African medicines as immune modulators and anti-coronavirus therapy or therapeutics. The program has been working with the African Medicines COVID-19 research team in researching several South African herbs and formulations with documented evidence for treatment of respiratory infections, signs and symptoms. One of the herbs our team is working on is what is known as Artemisia afra. Our Department of Science and Innovation is also leading a research and innovation pillar of the Cannabis Industrialization Master Plan. To this extent, our focus is the development of medicinal products for COVID-19, cancers, diabetes, TB and HIV/AIDS, and neurodegenerative diseases.
After weeks of lobbying from airline bosses and the hospitality sector, the British government has made a U-turn out of the 14-day self-isolation rule and has now published a list of more than 50 countries that Brits can visit without facing quarantine on return. Summer holidays, once a dream, have now become a reality for thousands of English families. Juliana Lainka has more.
Quarantine scrapped. After weeks of lobbying from airline bosses and the hospitality sector, the British government have made a U-turn on the 14-day self-isolation rule and have now published a list of more than 50 countries that Brits can visit without facing quarantine on return. Summer holidays, once a dream, have now become a reality for thousands of English families.
We're just delighted that there is demand there. People want to get away. They want to get away with their families. And the government has listened to the concern that we all had about the blanket quarantine policy. This just shows that there's a real demand out there for holidays, which is great for my members and the travel industry more generally, which has been absolutely decimated by this crisis.
In Spain's Balearic island of Mallorca, hundreds of Britons have arrived over the past few days. The first UK tourists in months. Positive scenes for an industry crippled due to the border closures. But not all popular destinations were included. Controversially, Portugal was left off the list, a major deterrent for British tourists, who accounted for 2.1 million of Portugal's foreign visitors last year, the second biggest market after Spain. So, summer holidays are back in the diary. Pubs and restaurants are open for business again. And the creative industry has been given a lifeline to weather the storm while curtains remain closed. For Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government, he'll be hoping that these new measures will heal the wounds for Brits who have suffered from one of the worst COVID death rates in the world. Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels Television News in London.
Well, Juliana is on Skype from London at this moment. Good evening, Juliana. Thank you for your time. Obviously, you haven't gone off on holiday quite yet.
I haven't gone off on holiday yet, laddie. So I've got to say I've been tempted. When I was looking at some of the rushes to put together this report, I was so shocked by the amount of Brits just desperate to get away. And as the footage just shows, that as soon as these quarantine rules that were put together by the Home Secretary Priti Patel a couple of weeks ago were lifted, literally thousands of Brits have booked their holidays. Tour operators like TUI, budget airlines like Ryanair and EasyJet have really seen a surge in people booking their flights. I've got to tell you, having a couple of days off in the year for the English, I've got to say, because it's not the British, it does include to the other four nations of Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, but certainly for the English, this was one measure that they wanted to see U-turned, and it has. Of course, not every country is on that list, including Nigeria, I've got to say, but certainly for the majority of the EU and beyond, including Thailand, Britain will be able to go there in the next couple of weeks and come back to British shores without having to self-isolate.
Well, this is coming against the background of the reopening of a couple of other things on July the 4th, which was the weekend past. That, coupled with this, seems to have lightened things up a bit, although we have also had the stories that some of the establishments that opened have had to re-shut themselves after some of their patrons tested positive.
It has. It's been a really busy, frantic couple of days in Britain. Lockdown almost makes 24 hours feel like 2 months, but certainly over the past week it's been very busy. As you said, Saturday, the 4th of July, which has been dubbed Super Saturday, did see the reopening of the hospitality sector. Pubs, bars, restaurants were able to open their doors again, and typically the English didn't fail to be out. You know, pubs were open from 6 a.m. in the morning, and there were some quite shocking scenes, actually, of no self-isolating around some parts of central London, around other parts of the country. Of course, once you've had a few alcoholic drinks, it's pretty difficult to self-isolate. And subsequently after that, there have been some pubs that have had to close because there have been some cases of COVID-19 detected within their premises. But I've got to say, today's Wednesday, Prime Minister's question day, there wasn't much criticism from that. It seems to be that the opposition has accepted that some part of the tracing application within the government, or what the government has put out, is working. I went to a restaurant recently. When you get in there, you've got to scan a QR code, you've got to register your details, and they do that for each and every party that attends an establishment. So if somebody within that establishment does have COVID-19, it can easily be tracked. So it's not been seen controversial that some bars or pubs have had to close. It's almost been heralded as a success for the track and trace system.
I've just got enough time to ask you about the Chancellor's budget. Of course, there have had to be adjustments in the wake of what has happened with COVID-19, right?
Well, absolutely. And let me very quickly say, laddie, it wasn't a budget. The budget doesn't come until autumn. This wasn't a new statement, but it definitely was a budget. I've never seen anything like it. Within 30 minutes, the British government spent £30 billion. I think some of the standouts have got to be the Kevin bonus. We've got a huge problem at the moment with over 9 million people out of work, the government paying for their wages. There are concerns that as soon as this scheme tapers off in October, that there will be mass redundancy. Chancellor Rishi Sunak now said to all employers, we will give you £1,000 per employee if you keep them in jobs until the end of January. We also have a reduction of stamp duty. The threshold, if you're buying a house, to pay a huge one-off tax on that house has been lifted up to £500,000. I know there's no time, but the list goes on and on. I've got to say, after that statement, a lot of people are tipping Chancellor Rishi Sunak to be the next Prime Minister. He has been absolutely outstanding during this COVID lockdown and has been spending more than we've ever seen any Tory finance minister spend.
Indeed. There's still a long way to go before he gets to that point. I'm sure Boris Johnson isn't quite prepared to go anywhere at this point. But thank you so much, Juliana, for that update. Thank you for the reporting, and do stay safe out there.
Thank you.
More than 3 million people in the United States have contracted COVID-19. This comes as more than 60,000 people tested positive for the virus in 24 hours, becoming the highest single-day record the country has seen, the last being 55,220 on July the 2nd.
The US has reported a record of more than 60,000 daily confirmed cases of coronavirus. The previous highest tally was 52,220, which was recorded on July the 2nd. Despite the numbers, President Donald Trump says America is in a good place and he will pressure governors to reopen schools.
So we're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools, to get them open. And it's very important. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on open your schools in the fall.
Colombia's President Iván Duque is extending the nationwide lockdown by more than 2 weeks after reported cases and deaths accelerated in several cities. The measure, which was implemented in March, was due to be lifted on the 15th of July but has now been pushed back to the 1st of August. Chile's coronavirus cases has passed 300,000, overtaking Spain and the United Kingdom, making the Latin American country ranked number 6 in the world for COVID-19 cases, behind Peru and Russia. Australia says it will likely slow down the return of its citizens from abroad as it grapples with a fresh outbreak that has led to the isolation of its second most populous state, Victoria. Residents in the coastal city of Melbourne could be seen buying groceries and making last-minute stops to sit down at cafes and restaurants just before the lockdown.
We've come through 3 months of it, and I think the next 6 weeks, though tough, it applies right through the greater area.
And it's clean-up time in Serbia outside the parliament in Belgrade after an angry crowd stormed the building overnight following the announcement of plans to reimpose a lockdown. The wrecks of burned cars and damaged traffic signs remained as evidence of the rioting. Residents in central Belgrade said they were not surprised at the protests, saying people were tired of being shut up in their homes.
Physical distancing as well as the wearing of face masks are two non-pharmaceutical interventions that can help contain the spread of COVID-19. You find details of this and indeed other protocols on the website of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the NCDC. The World Health Organization's website, on the other hand, has details of interventions at national and international levels, as well as what the body is doing to confirm that the virus is now airborne. Channelstv.com is your go-to website for all news, both for the COVID-19 pandemic and indeed all other news. Do check it out for business, for sports, aviation, and politics. That's our COVID-19 update tonight. I am Ladi Akridoluale. Thanks for watching and good night.